Oil.
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 In the last 6 months, 6 of the largest oil companies made more than $100 billion in profits.
Imagine this: a handful of largely empty desert sheikhdoms with virtually no industrial base, no large population, no global influence. Then oil, black gold, burst from the sand. Within decades, these states went from obscurity to commanding relevance in world politics. How did it happen? And what role did Western powers play in shaping that transformation? Today, we chart how oil politics turned small desert states into global power brokers, and how Western interests shaped, nurtured, and constrained their politics. The story begins in the early 20th century. For centuries, the Arabian Peninsula's desert sands were home to Bedouin caravans, date palms, and pearl divers, not global superpowers. Then, in 1938, in eastern Saudi Arabia, the first major oil field was struck at Dammam 7. Suddenly, the world's appetite for petroleum turned a remote region into prime strategic real estate. Once oil revenues poured in, the political economy of these states changed drastically. The term petrostate captures this: states whose revenue, politics, and very power are built on oil exports. The Gulf sheikhdoms, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, etc., became rentier states, i.e., governments that live off rent, petrodollars, rather than taxation of their citizens. This shift carried two key consequences. First, rapid accumulation of wealth, in some cases staggering, and second, dependence on Western companies and Western markets to export oil. For instance, the extraction, refining, and shipping infrastructure was established by Western oil majors, Anglo-Persian, Royal Dutch Shell, Standard Oil, etc. In short, oil did not just emancipate these states from foreign influence, but the reverse. Fast forward to the 1960s and 70s, oil exporters banded together into Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, in 1960, after recognizing the leverage they held in order to coordinate production, to manage pricing, and to challenge the dominance of the Western oil majors. Then came the 1973 oil embargo, triggered by Arab states' support for Egypt and Syria in the Yom Kippur War and their protest against Western support for Israel. Oil prices quadrupled overnight, economies shook. This moment transformed the Gulf states' oil wealth into geopolitical power. A barrel of oil now equated to influence. Western economies were forced to listen. Western militaries, Western diplomacy, Western security arrangements had to adjust to safeguard energy flows. In this way, a small desert state obtained global leverage. Saudi Arabia is perhaps the most dramatic example. With roughly 17% of the world's proven petroleum reserves and the world's largest oil exporter, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia used oil not merely as revenue but as strategy. Through alliances with the United States, Saudi Arabia obtained military protection, and in return, it ensured steady supplies and pro-Western alignment during the Cold War and beyond. The West's role in this story cannot be overstated. The Western oil majors built the infrastructure, Western markets bought the oil, and Western militaries provided security. A convenient partnership emerged. The Gulf states would supply the oil, the West would supply the security guarantee, arms, technology, and prestige. Security dependence flowed from this arrangement. Various Gulf states host US military bases, jet fighters, radar installations. Their foreign policy is shaped in part by Western strategic interests. As one article notes, the so-called small Gulf states exhibit a high degree of quasi-dependency on the Western powers. This condition has meant that while these states possess tremendous wealth, their sovereignty and independent agency have been restricted by Western alliances. Moreover, the concept of petrodollar recycling emerged. According to it, oil revenues flowed into Western banks and international financial centers, securing the Western economy, while Gulf elites invested around the world. This makes oil politics not only about energy markets, but about global financial flows and power structures. What does it mean for a small desert state to become a global power broker? One word: leverage. They may not field vast armies or have large populations, but they do control something crucial: oil and gas supplies, which the modern world cannot easily replace overnight. Qatar is an example. Though small in area and population, as one of the world's top LNG exporters, it holds outsized influence, both economically and diplomatically. Similarly, the UAE, through its sovereign wealth funds and strategic investments, projects influence far beyond its territorial size. In the recent decade, Saudi Arabia, under the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, has shifted from simply oil-rich to power-broking. A recent article described Saudi Arabia as marching from petrodollars to power politics. Its international investments, diplomacy, and mega projects like NEOM and its role in OPEC all illustrate how oil wealth allows a small desert monarchy to punch above its weight. As we move into the 21st century, several challenges and shifts have emerged that reshape oil politics. First, the global push for renewable energy and decarbonization threatens the very foundation of petrostates. Demand for fossil fuels may shrink over time. The Gulf states are responding by launching ambitious diversification plans. Saudi Vision 2030, UAE's investment in renewables, Qatar's LNG expansion, all are examples of it. Oil remains central, but the game is changing. Second, competition from new producers and the shale revolution in the United States have eroded the monopoly of Gulf oil states. This means that Gulf states must reinvent themselves. One study describes 3 eras of oil strategy. First, 1950s to 1970s as pre-OPEC era. Second, 1970s to 2010s, oil for security era. And third, from the 2010s to the present, where diversification, smart diplomacy, and balancing great powers matter. Third, oil politics remains deeply geopolitical. Conflicts ranging from Yemen to Libya, pipeline routes in Central Asia, sanctions on Iran and Russia, all tie back to energy. Oil remains not only a commodity, but a weapon of diplomacy and pressure. Finally, small desert states use oil wealth to invest globally, buying real estate, tech companies, and sports teams. These investments secure influence in the West and beyond. This global capital flight ensures these states are players, not merely exporters. Saudi's investments into SoftBank's Vision Fund, Uber, and other firms underscore this shift. Oil wealth brought rapid change, but also internal tensions. The The rentier state model often means limited taxation, limited political accountability. Some scholars argue this fosters authoritarianism. Indeed, in major petrostates, political pluralism is weak. Domestically, monarchs and rulers used oil revenues to fund generous social programs, providing legitimacy without requiring broad participation, bread and circuses on a grand scale. The formula, free education, free health, subsidies, jobs funded by oil, as demand grows and populations swell, this model is under strain, prompting the new diversification push. Externally, oil wealth enables expansive foreign policy. Arms purchases, bases abroad, foreign investments and influence campaigns are funded by oil. The UAE's massive arms imports and the role of Gulf states in mediation or conflicts illustrate this. Let's not understand how Western interests shaped all this. As one account puts it, oil politics in the Middle East involved contractual agreements, drilling, piping, shipping, and the monopolies of Western oil companies. Colonial and post-colonial Western powers cultivated client states in the region to ensure access. The British, for example, converted their Royal Navy from coal to oil in the early 20th century, intensifying Western strategic interest in the Persian Gulf oil. And after World War II, the United States assumed the mantle, trying Middle Eastern oil to Western security architectures. The Gulf states accepted the oil for security bargain. You provide energy, we provide protection. In return for this, Western influence permeated domestic politics. Military bases, arms deals, intelligence cooperation, and sometimes direct intervention. For example, Iraq-Kuwait in the 1990 invasion and subsequent Gulf War. Conclusively, oil-rich states may be rich, but they were never fully independent of Western security frameworks. Let's revisit Saudi Arabia to show how this transformed into power brokering. Saudi Arabia's oil revenue since the 1970s is estimated in trillions. This wealth enabled Riyadh to pursue global ambitions. Under Crown Prince MBS, the kingdom is no longer satisfied with being the world's petrol station. It wants to lead into finance, technology, tourism, and diplomacy. The best example is the Saudi-Iran 2023 detente brokered by China. The public investment funds multi-billion-dollar acquisitions of global assets, megacity, NEOM, elevated defense spending. All of this reflects a small desert state acting as a global power broker across multiple domains and not just energy. The desert monarchy now influences global finance, sport, culture, security, and diplomacy. And the West, still engaged and now negotiating the terms. Saudi Arabia is balancing Washington, Moscow, and Beijing, not simply following the Washington. The old oil for security map has been redrawn. What does all of this mean for the world today? First, oil is no longer the only source of leverage, but it remains hugely significant. Second, small states with oil wealth can shape global politics without the classical trappings of power, large armies, or industrial bases. Third, Western powers must continuously adapt. Their energy security, their military posture, their diplomacy must account for these empowered oil states. Yet, vulnerabilities persist. Petrostates are exposed to volatile oil prices, global climate change policy, competition from shale, and renewables. Internal legitimacy can be fragile when social contracts are based on oil handouts rather than taxation and representation. Diversification is urgent, and geopolitics remains precarious. For the West, ensuring stable energy flows and dealing with empowered oil states turned actors demands new strategies, not simply pumping more oil. It means engagement on investment, clean energy, arms ties, diplomacy, and global governance. For small desert states, the game is evolving. No longer simply resource exporters, they're global players, and their alliances and choices matter more than ever. From desert sands to global boardrooms, the rise of oil politics transformed the world. What once seemed remote is now central. Small states, fueled by black gold, have become architects of global power. And the West? It's no longer simply the master. They are, for now, one partner among many. The sands have shifted, and so too has the game of power.